computer. Wow.
Yeah, that way you'll have it and it'll download when it's done, and you put it where you want, and you can, you can edit it. When I bring it in, I because I do music with it, I'll put it on and edit, some of the silly stuff. But
well, would you like to go ahead then, and we could just go ahead and put it straight on YouTube?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay.
You're okay with that? That's fine.
So welcome, Cait. Welcome. We're together with our bishop, Cait Finnegan Grenier, bishop of the Celtic Christian Church, and I'm Ginger Walsh. I'm one of her priests at the CCC and the pastor of Prince of Peace. So, Cait, thank you for joining me today. We really just wanted to you to share your wisdom and insight on prayer and what prayer means for you. How do normal people pray? How can we do this?
I'm not sure I can share wisdom, but I like talking to you.
Okay.
Prayer. Well, what we had been talking about earlier was specifically mental prayer.
Right.
And that grew out of a conversation that we were having, and the importance of it. And you don't hear that phrase as much anymore. It's like when I was a kid, that's how they taught you to pray. You learned your rote prayers, especially in the Catholic Church, Artes and Aves and all of that. But then what we were taught, which was vital for life, at least for me, and I know it was for my parents and my grandparents, was mental prayer. How do we follow the scripture obligation? Pray always. It's an invitation, but it's really an obligation for us Christians. Pray always. How do you do that? Well, you're not going to be on your knees all day. You function, right? And there's a couple ways of looking at that, fulfilling that. Pray always can begin in the morning each day. The people in my family as a kid, you'd wake up in the morning and you'd bless yourself when you open your eyes, right? Yeah. And with that came the morning offering, which was a rote prayer, but when it was said from the heart, I offered today my joys, works, prayers, and sufferings, and whatever you wanted to add to that. And it was for the good of souls and the world, blah, blah, blah. And that was a way of beginning your mindfulness for the day. Mm-hmm. You did that. And we may have used different words to understand what we were doing, but we call it mindfulness today. That was one way of kind of starting the day knowing I'm not always going to be thinking about God and holy stuff, but I'm going to always be doing it. It might be my office work, it might be teaching, nursing, whatever it is. My work now is my prayer. It's very Benedictine spirituality, really. The other way, the additional way of doing it, mental prayer, is to recognize prayer. The definition itself is lifting the mind and the heart to God. Isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. And just think about what that means. You're lifting your mind and your heart to God. And if you think of the mind as the psyche, the soul, the seat of the soul, this is what we're doing. And that's a conscious thing. We lift it up intentionally. And how do we do that? Well, it's our mind. We use it for thinking. We're always thinking. Mind never shuts down, at least most of the time. I might go numb once in a while, but most of the time, there's always something going on in your head when you're driving, you're talking, you're having conversations in your head, or wishing you hadn't had conversations. Reworking conversations you may have had. Mm-hmm. But that's the opportunity then. If we believe in an almighty God, almighty, omnipresent, with us always, right? And all loving, then we have access at all times to the Spirit of God. So how do we do that? Whether we're on our knees in a church praying to this Spirit of God, to this God, or we're in the car driving, or on a train, anywhere, we're not alone because God is omnipresent. So how do we access that? You can't sit at your desk in an office and pray aloud because you'll lose your job pretty soon. But you can, in your mind, pray. You can talk to God. And that's all it is. It's talking to God. And then shut up and listen. Give him a chance to respond. But an example of where it saved my sanity was when I left the convent. I went back to the job that I'd had before I was in the convent, which was at Texaco. I hated the job. I hated it, but it paid my bills. And anyway, I would sit at my desk doing routine stuff that I could do in my sleep. And in the boredom of it all, I automatically was like, oh Lord, this really stinks. I hate this job, in my head, quietly. My boss can hear me, and what am I going to do about this? And then I'm saying, and I have this to do. I was actually talking to God, planning my evening. Like, when I get out of here, you know where I'm going? Why? It sounds silly, but it's because I love God. We're friends. As they say, in Crocodile Dundee, he said, God and I, we're mates. That's my relationship with God. I presume upon it. I know it's there. And because it's there, I talk all the time to God, silently in my head. That's mental prayer. It's one aspect of it. The other aspect is being quiet and listening. So meditation gets in there, where you put, maybe even before you pray, hopefully, quiet yourself down. The breathing exercises people do just for mental health meditation today, breathing in and out, the way you encourage people in your daily prayer with people.
Right.
And everybody does it. Everybody does it, but many people call it different things. We'll call that a meditation practice. And as Christians, we're going to have a whole different slant on what that means and what its purpose is. Yes, right. Mental health is good, but it's also to quiet the soul, to be receptive to whatever the Spirit of God inspires us. And that's part of mental prayer, is the inspiration that we get in the silent moments. In those, I'm not silent enough in mental prayer. I talk too much. So I do my silent prayer. I do my listening at night because I'm tired.
Okay.
When I lay my head down on the pillow and I know I only have a few minutes left of consciousness, I say to God, I'm going to sleep now. It's your turn to talk to me. I'll shut up now. It's the only time I'm going to shut up. But talk to me in my dreams. Use my psyche in my dreams. Help me to understand my dreams, to interpret the dreams, whether Jungian or some productive way of doing it. But that's all the Spirit of God permeating our being and our life, interacting 24/7. If we can embrace it, be open, lovingly embrace it, in the sense that this is not just a ritual, an empty ritual. This is friends in the heart. God is my friend, and I trust God. And that's not to be proud. It's not to say, I've got it all down. I know God. Because most of my prayer, especially my vocal prayer, I live alone, so I talk aloud to God. Most of my vocal prayer is, listen, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea about what you are. I can't get my head around it. You're eternal, infinite. But I love you. What little I know of you, what little I've experienced, I love you. And I can't not pray to you. I can't not believe in you, because my experience tells me how real you are. And the peace that comes from our love tells me how real you are. Even in a time like this, which is so terribly frightening, it's everyone in the world is afraid right now. And so a prayer form like this has a double role. It can calm the nerves, and it can bring us to that place where no nerves are interfering, no words are interfering. And I had a very beautiful conversation with a member of my family this week, and she said to me, I'm so upset by what's going on with this virus. I can't pray. And she started to tell me about She prays the rosary generally, and she said, I try to pray the rosary, and I'm lost. My head's everywhere else. I can't pray. And I'll go to the beach in my car and isolate at the beach and just sit and watch the waves, which are always so helpful to her in prayer. And she said, and nothing, no words to God, nothing. And I said to her, you have reached the point that prayerful people yearn for.
Mm.
Because all of our prayers, all of our verbal attempts are human attempts to engage God, listen to God. They're really meant for us. It's the path of the Lord, but it's meant to get to the goal of hearing the Lord in silence, that deep meditation, that silence, and then where you can get to the point of contemplation. You're overwhelmed with the Lord. And what she was describing to me, I said, there are nuns who spend their life in cloisters hoping to get to where you find yourself on the beach.
Wow.
But she had not thought of prayer in that way. She thought of prayer as, the beads, the rote prayers were taught, and all sincere from the heart. And some talking, of course,
Right.
individual talking. But the idea of, I got nothing, I have no prayer, I have nothing left to say. Well, that's the way we get to when we just say, I'm ready for you to talk. I'm ready to listen. But, I think it's important for us to train people to recognize their steps in prayer, where they're at and where they're going. Where do they want to go? And do they know there is such a goal? Not the conversation you have over a hot dog usually, but unless you're in my family.
Well, you sort of.
But it can come up, and I think it's important for us to bring these things up unashamedly, and not be embarrassed by it, because first of all, it's our job. It's what we do.
That's true. There you go.
And time is of the essence right now. Because people are suffering and people are frightened. How do you bring the peace of Christ to them? It can only come in prayer, unless they get zapped in some miraculous way, which would be lovely. But that's not normally the way it works in humanity. It's a two-way street. We need to be receptive and want it, seek it, and then it becomes a true give and take in a friendship. That's real.
You reminded me, Cait, when I was a teenager, my mother once told me, she was trying to explain mental prayer to me, because I think I went to her with that passage from Philippians, pray always, right? How are we supposed to do this, Mom? She said, well, it's not what you're thinking. Because I thought that meant I had to be like rolling through the Psalms or the Our Father, or something had to be always in my head. She goes, no, it's not what you're thinking, it's who you're thinking to. So she said, well, if you're looking in your closet in the morning and you say, what am I going to wear today? The yellow shirt or the blue shirt, Lord? Then that becomes a prayer. I was like, what? Now, of course, it's not that that's a momentous decision to be prayed over, but she was trying to get me into the habit of directing my thoughts to God. And I'm grateful. She also had taught me, as your parents taught you, the morning offering and other prayers that punctuate the day. I think there's a wisdom in that the ancient practice of the office, or the liturgy of the hours, where it becomes a discipline that you're going to pray at these times. Not that, it's not, when Jesus says, don't pray like the pagans, just blah, blah, blah. He's not talking about the rosary. He's not talking about the office. He's talking about this fear-based prayer that you have to somehow appease the deity by doing certain things in a certain way and say the right. Like the pagan prayers of Jesus' times were kind of stressful and involved a lot of words, because you had to be sure to say the right ones. And that's not the case with us, so we can relax. It's relaxing in the presence of someone who loves us. And sometimes, I remember once, I must have been, I must have been a young adult because I remember I was in an office stairwell, just walking down the stairs on my way to a meeting or whatever, and chattering to the Lord in my head the way I did because Mom, that's the way Mom, oh, so we're going here, Lord, Mother. And I'll never forget at the landing where you turn around in the stairwell, I was like gobsmacked by this sudden sense of presence.
Mm.
And I just stopped and caught my breath. It was sort of like a nice little reminder, hey, love you too, honey. Got you back in there.
Yeah, yeah. It's overwhelming when that hits.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
about don't pray like the pagans pray. I think many of us do pray like the pagans in the sense of the negative way. Not all pagans pray in a negative way, obviously.
Right, and I apologize. That's, I actually have a lot of respect for modern pagans.
But I mean, there are pagans who pray just like what we're talking about. They pray for blessings on the earth. It's not prayer of trying to control God. And that's the secret, I think, that we share with pagans who are in the know and Christians who are in the know. We're not praying to Santa Claus here, and giving them our list, I mean,
in Jesus' name, now you have to do it.
Yeah, it's not, that's not the goal of our prayer, but it often becomes the everyday method we do it with unconsciously, because we know God's almighty and we know God loves us, or we believe it and we hope it anyway. And so please, 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 please give me, protect, do this, do that, do this. And I'll be back later. You get to work now, I'll be back later.
I'll be back with my next list.
I'll be back with my next list. I'm checking it twice. But it's beyond that. God's not this Santa Claus. That's not the point of prayer. Sure, we would ask anyone we loved and trusted for help, obviously. And certainly, if, I've got a big friend who's almighty, I want him on my team. But at the same time, the basis of the relationship is one of deep love. And we don't use and misuse those we love. We come to them humbly and, knowing that what they give out of love, not because we've been nagging, although I do nag God a lot, I have to admit, I nag him all the time. but it's in a fun way. It's an Irish mom way. But yeah, I think there's a difference there in how do we see prayer? Is it simply something to get me something? Now we're in this virus thing.
Right.
Do you think I don't pray every day? Oh Lord, take care of this one and this one and this one. I have my prayer book here, right? It's a little notebook that detectives must carry it. I don't know. I got it in Staples. The prayers in this notebook are simply people's names. I just put people's names in it, pages after another, of names of those I know and love, those who've asked for prayers. And I look at those names, their needs come to mind, and I offer them to God. You know better than I what they need. This is what they ask for. You know what they need, what will be helpful. I trust in love. So it's not a question of, look, Santa Claus, Ginger wants a pair of ice skates. No, it's Ginger needs it. Ginger's needs, Dave's needs, and I give them to you in trust. And so the prayer becomes one of just trusting, the way a little child will trust their parent to take care of them, take care of their needs. So I think it's important for us to differentiate in a time like this, which is filled with terror, and our instinct is, oh dear God, save us, send us a miracle, send us a cure, send us this. And those are legitimate prayers, prayers of petition.
Right.
But they should never be separated from prayers of thanksgiving for what we do have. And my God, look at us here and how many people were able to communicate. We've got a lot to get through this that the Black Plague didn't have,
Right.
And
I have a home where I feel safe. I'm not afraid of my husband when he comes home at night. A lot of people can't say that. That they live someplace safe.
Yeah. And we have the medical profession and the technology today. If we can let them loose to get their work done, they save us from so much stuff like this. And that's the divine grace working right through humans, guiding you. So we have that. And there's a lot to go beyond the prayer of petition to thanksgiving, and finally to the prayer of praise,
Mm.
then into silence and just melt away in God's presence. There's so many ways that expresses itself, and it can be just in total tears. It can be many ways. For me, it's tears. I mean, that's what happens. But that's what happens when I love a person too. So,
Yeah.
it's the expression, the human expression of love that somehow. But it can be anything. It can just be deep silence, the deep solace you feel within that I know I'm not alone. And suddenly, like you experience the coming down the stairs,
Right. That sense of
Yeah.
awareness.
Yeah. I think it's important to teach people who may not have been taught this, that there's a process to deepening the prayer life, opening to it, deepening to it, participating in it. And there are goals to set, not that we're in charge of those goals. I mean, when you look at contemplation as a goal, it's only a goal if this is what the Lord gives to us. That's
Right.
the gift of grace. We don't plan it out, well, I'm going to do this in March, and then by July I should be at contemplation. Or as they used to kid around in the convent, we would read St. Teresa's work, The Interior Castle, and they'd say, what castle are you in? Crazy
Oh,
stuff.
I'm way ahead of you, friend. I'm
Well,
over here.
you're a real novice, aren't you? No, but I mean, you'd kid about it, but that's the thing. You can't get caught up in that process. You just
Right.
live. You just live it, and somewhere along the line, the grace of God hits you unexpectedly. And you may not recognize what it is. I saw it hit my daughter one time when she was a little kid, and we were sitting watching Indiana Jones and I think the Holy Grail or something. And I don't know, she was about 8. She's pretty young. We're sitting there having popcorn watching this thing, and she sees the Nazis going after the Grail and desecrating, misusing it. And all of a sudden, we went from watching this adventure movie to my daughter is sobbing in my arms.
Oh.
I said, what's the matter, Rose? What's the matter? And she's got a grip on herself, and she said, this is terrible. She said, I would be so happy just to lay eyes on a cup that Jesus held.
Oh.
And here they were.
Look in the mirror, honey.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, oh my God, it was a wake-up call for me. I mean,
Wow.
I knew she had her relationship with God, and she had her rock that she sat on, and and she never put it in terms of God or anything like this, but this was the closest she came to that. The love that she felt in her and didn't know how to express but through tears came out finally when I quizzed her. I would be so overwhelmed, happy to just see what Christ used. See it in the eyes.
Wow.
Well, we got through the movie and she went to bed, and I came to Joe into bed and I said, okay, we got to talk. Because we have a graced child, and we need to be aware of the action of grace in her that she certainly doesn't understand. But wow, what I saw tonight was the work of grace. And it's those moments, and they can hit us at any time in life.
I think that you're touching on something that's been coming up for me a lot recently. I recently read Karen Armstrong's The Case for God. As you know, we've talked about it. And one thing she said that really struck me, this is a paraphrase, but she warned that modern meaning 20th and 21st century American culture, when we think of religion and the religious life, we tend to think of it in terms of intellectual assent to a certain creed. She goes, no, religion is not about accepting certain ideas. It's never a passive. Genuine faith is not a passive experience. You live it, you walk it, you experience it. And so that's why, like with the Psalms, if I'm reading through something that's uncomfortable, and that comes up a lot when you read the Bible, there's a lot in there. Anyone who says the Bible is full of love hasn't read it. I mean, it is big picture, but there's a lot that's very tough in there. So I'm approaching it, I hope, with the willingness to walk through it and to keep praying it. That's one beautiful thing about our common prayer in the liturgy, is that it's cyclical. We come back because we know that it'll feel different today than it did 3 years ago or a year ago. We're always moving forward within ourselves and with our God.
Yeah. If we don't get stuck in the actual words and the history of what they're doing, but look at the lesson that we're being taught by their humility in the psalm. The psalmists were pretty humble, and they were pretty close to God to be able to scream at him the way they did. You know?
Oh, they were aggravated, or what have I done to you? Like Psalm 90 that we've been using in coffee break prayer in the mornings. I love that psalm because he's like, what did I do? How long, oh Lord? We don't know what he was suffering with, but we know, we're pretty sure he wasn't like being smited by heaven. It was just, he was actually wrestling with mortality. He says, you get to live forever. Why is our life so short?
Yeah. It's a good question today.
It's
again.
A good question today, right?
That's what people are frightened of, and how do you bring them past that fear that every one of us dies, and until we embrace that mortality, we live in fear of it, and most people, you have to deny it to get to work in the morning. You can't sit home thinking about, oh, I'm going to die. I mean, you integrate it and process it in life, but for the most part, we end up in some form of denying it just to survive and thrive.
Right.
But on the spiritual level, there's that. I always think back to the story of the Trappists years ago. I don't know if they do it now, where they dig their own grave when they got there. And I used to think, wow, that's pretty harsh. But it's almost like once you've dug it, it's there. It's there, it's there, you're gonna go there. Now get to work, go do your stuff. And I when did I discover that? Was when my husband died and I bought 2 graves. And so we buried him in his grave. The other one is for me. And I go down there, to visit the grave, and I sit there for hours and I pray. And I pray for the peace that I know. I look at that grave and I say, in the summertime when the grass is nice, maybe I should go and like measure and like lie in the grass and, really embrace this. And I'm like, that's really sick. Oh, don't do that. Don't bring a picnic and, But I sit there and I think about it, the grave, the dirt, the aspect of death and burial that frightened the life out of me as a young child. And that I was gradually able to overcome that fear and get past it. Once I embraced it, that unless a seed falls to the earth, not much good, right? It's going to come from it. So in working my garden out here one year, I made myself dig in the garden with my hands and get really dirty and really get into it, because I'm a New York City kid. I didn't have a garden, I had a houseplant. And I worked that garden all summer and, grew all kinds of stuff in it. But one day I sat there, and just sat in the dirt, and I'm pulling this up, and I was putting tomato plants in. And then I moved over and I was putting, I don't know what I was putting in by seed. And I held the seed in my hand. And it was one of those aha moments. And I picked the seed up, and that scripture came to me, and I put it down there, and I'm like, thank you. And I buried it, and of course we had a great garden that year. But doing that helped me to process it. I am a seed. This physical thing here that I'm pretty attached to, I'm going to have to say goodbye. And it will have served me well, probably better than I've served it,
Yeah.
And God bless it. God bless it. And I will rest it here in this spot, in this grave next to my beloved. And I'll go on to the next step. But I think if we don't embrace the harsh reality of our death, we can only do it in prayer. We are going to live in terror at times like this. Not everyone can jump on that quickly. I realize I go for the jugular, as you know.
That's one of your gifts, Cait.
But sometimes that startle effect will help to snap people out of it and say, yeah, well, okay, it's this or that. I either live in terror or I process. It's a choice, you know. But some people you got to go slow. You know? I've told people I'm at peace. Just this week, I was talking to people and I said, well, I'm at peace in all of this. And two of them said to me, they don't want to hear me say that anymore. I'm like, why? Because you scare me. If you're at peace, you mean you're at peace, you're ready to die. Yeah. And she, well, we don't want you to die. I'm like, what? That doesn't matter, really. You know, I do it wrong.
We're doing our best to stick around. You reminded me of one time I was at a meeting with a bunch of social workers, and we were talking about death rates for this and death rates for that and how we were going to. And one of the social workers says, listen, at the end of the day, the death rate is 1 each.
Right.
I was like, whoa.
No, and nobody gets out alive.
And then
Yeah,
a different meeting, by the way, just to throw this out there because I thought it was pretty funny. I was doing HIV/AIDS medical case management, and I think it was in an article because I don't remember where I heard it, but somebody put the idea in my mind that life is a terminal sexually transmitted condition. So, you know, as Christians, we need to find peace with both ends in the middle of that, right?
Yeah, and you know, and I understand that most people wouldn't sit and joke like this with it, you know, because it is frightening. I saw my father live in fear of death most of his life and he was a man who prayed to St. Joseph the grace of a peaceful death, and he got it. The most peaceful death I'd ever seen. Him and my mother both. They died in my arms and very peaceful. Okay, but he still lived in fear until he got to that point. And I think that's normal. It's human, and depending how people have lived or seen death when they were young, experienced it. But without making a joke about it to people like that, how do we get them to just process it and know that there's something else? And that's, I think, what prayer helps. If we can teach them to pray and experience the living God without it sounding like holy roller stuff. This is just normal. It's normal life to experience a creative love that put us here, that somehow got us here, evolution, whatever way we got here. And I really don't care if we call it Christian or pagan prayer. I mean, we all pray, you know, it's the same God. And I have several pagan friends in the area, and you know, when we talk about this, we're talking about the same thing. And they may have different rituals that lead them into a deeper prayer. That's okay. We have our rituals, as long as they work and can help us slow down, be receptive, and just wait upon the Lord. You know, I don't know how else to get people through this, because it is truly terrifying. People will watch their spouses die or not. They'll be apart from them. Just can't be together. You know, their children will die without their parents. Parents will die and never see their kids. This is really harsh, bitter reality, unexpected, and yet here we are. So I think with each person we talk to, it's important to go to the jugular as quickly as we can, gently, not the way I do it, but gently to help them to realize this is not it. This is what we love, it's what we're used to, but it's not it. And whether the virus takes me tomorrow or something else takes me 20 years from now, I prefer that. But whichever, it's going to happen. So how do I prepare in peace and not live a life of fear, you know, hiding from it? I think it's the call of every Christian to help each other with that. But it's definitely the call of the clergy, you know. Our call is not just to do rituals and that, it's to help people learn about God, share good news.
Too, Cait, the part of the good news is that we are so loved. We are so loved.
Yeah.
And most of us don't realize it. I know I have no idea of, I know like this little bit of the amount that God loves me. He loves me with an ocean, and I'm bigger than an ocean, and I'm lucky if I sense a drop. We are so beloved. If we could, that gives me courage. It gave me courage Like I was one of my trying times of faith, and was when my mom passed away. I was already an adult, but even so, no one's. I don't care how old your mom is. You're never ready to lose her,
Right.
right? No matter what your relationship is or was, you're never ready to lose your mom. And it caused crisis of faith. I worried about her. My mother died in September, and for the first time, I understood the instinct that people have to put, like, I don't know if you have them over by you, Cait, but in the cemeteries here on Long Island, you can buy these blankets. They actually use the word blankets.
Blanket of flowers. Yeah.
And you could put I understood that instinct to try to keep someone warm. And what comforted me was the realization that my mother was so loved. She was so loved in this life by God and by the people who knew her. But my mother was kind of a quiet person. For whatever reason, I inherited some of my dad's gregarious personality, but my mother was very quiet. She was like the hidden person in the room. She was the one in the corner that you might not notice, but she was the one making sure that everyone was talking to someone, everyone had something nice to eat and drink, and she was just this incredible. I thought she was a very wise human being, and just incredibly full of love. Those who knew her loved her. Not many people knew her, but those who did loved her. Think, how could God just say, okay, now Joni's gone, she doesn't exist anymore, off to the next thing? Of course, my mother is held in love, whoever she is now. I don't know. We don't know what's in front of us, right? Cait, you talked about that just recently. We don't know what lies in front of us, but we know that we are loved. And if we are loved, we can trust that whatever's ahead is going to be good.
Yeah, and I tell you, I learned a lot of peace in thinking through this from talking it over with Joe. He was a good deal older than me and prepared for death for a long time. And not because he was sick, but just because he was wise. He prepared.
He was smart. Yeah.
Old age. Yeah. And he used to say to me, I don't know what's next. I don't know, but that's God's problem. And that's the way he'd put it, in his old French Canadian way. That's God's problem. That's not my problem. My problem is to live a good life and be loving, and I know it'll continue then. And a strange thing happened. The last mass that he said for us was on Christmas Eve. And
oh, wow.
We got to, well, it was the last, ritual mass. It was the last Christmas Eve, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all around the little altar in the room, and the other seminarians were there, and Patty, and he read the gospel, and we have the shared homily. He starts it and we share. He read the gospel, beautiful Christmas nativity gospel, and he sits back in his chair and he says, I got nothing. We were shocked. Here's our bishop. I got nothing. And we started to giggle, and in my head I'm thinking, oh dear Lord, I hope he's not losing it. But no, it was the most humble thing. What we quickly realized by just looking at his face and the prayerfulness of the moment, he had nothing he could say. He was in awe. Words, after 50-something years of preaching and priesthood, words were no more. They weren't helpful. They could not capture what he was experiencing regarding the incarnation. It was that moment of holiness that he was caught up, and I had no words, and he was very peaceful about it. So we sat in quiet and prayed, and then we began to share more as a group. But I was very touched by that. But it took a lifetime. And he finally had that moment of union that left him speechless. I'm speechless.
Cait, would you take us? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you to maybe close out our conversation with a blessing and a prayer.
Sure thing. Holy God, You who are the creator of all that is, we reflect your love. So many ways we reflect your love. Help us to walk on that path of union with you. Help us to be aware of you. We get so distracted. We live our life as Jesus lived his life. Help us never to be apart from you. Open our minds and hearts so that we can lift them up at any given moment at will. And feel free to interrupt our thoughts, Lord. Come to us and interrupt us. Draw us to yourself. Be that hound of heaven. Help us to know the door is always open. And help us to open our door to you. Take us where we are, in our fear, in this terrible fear that the world is full of right now. Comfort those who have already lost their loved ones. Oh my God, comfort them. Comfort those who see their loved ones dying at this moment. Those being tested, living in dread for the results. Help us all, Lord, as we live through this terrible, terrible pandemic. Help us to pray, to know you in ways we've never known you before. Bring us along this path of the Lord, always closer and in peace. And I ask you to touch the priests of this world and the ministers of this world, the rabbis, anyone, imams, anybody who's attending to the spiritual needs of the people in their path. Touch us. Give us the wisdom needed to say the words that will best help each person. To get out of our own heads and be aware of the people we speak with. Give us your grace, your divine life, and your wisdom so we can share it, simply share it. Get us through this. Help us to praise you each day, regardless of our feelings, and to be grateful for the love that you give us. And of course, I ask a special blessing, my God, on our priests at CCC, and our deacons, any of us who are reaching out in love. Help us to bring a joy to people in a true Celtic Christian spirituality, to see you reflected in this beauty we call creation. Bless our priests. Renew us in our priesthood. And give us the strength to serve you with love. I ask this blessing from you in Jesus' holy name, because Jesus said we could do that, Lord. And I trust that you will. I bless you, Ginger, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.